believe there are three things at the heart of community. True community. The type of community that challenges you, that pushes you outside of your comfort zone, that connects you to something bigger than yourself. I've been working in the field of humanitarian water aid for about a decade now. And I got started as a volunteer. I started volunteering with an organization that I now work for, Wine to Water. And I don't know how to describe it besides, it just felt right. I just wanted to be a part of the community of people that were there. And you may be going, wine to water, isn't that backwards? Didn't Jesus turn water into wine? Well, yes, it's a play on Jesus' first miracle, but we were founded by a bartender. And originally, he was pouring drinks, and he used, stuff like pouring wine to raise money to fund water projects around the world. But I don't think that gets to the heart or the essence of what our name means to us today. Those two things, wine and water, they're catalysts. They're catalysts for connection. I think, we can all agree, whether it's a Tuesday night or Thanksgiving, when a bottle of wine gets opened, relationships start to grow. It could be friends or strangers. It doesn't really matter. I personally have seen in the developing world as well with water, when a well gets drilled in the community, it's typically the starting point for celebration, connection, and that community typically is on a long journey of flourishing in the future. Well, I knew I wanted to be a part of this as I was volunteering with Wine to Water, and so it led to an internship, which thankfully led to a full-time job when I graduated. And, Wine to Water was something that I think I was looking for. I was looking for that connection. I was on a journey. But as I got to know these people, I realized that they were very ordinary and that I could be something there, and they taught me something over those years. Now, after about 5 years, I was given the opportunity to oversee all international programming. And our goal was to grow the organization. And we did grow, thankfully. We now have 50-plus people on staff and 4 international field offices. More importantly, this year, we reached our 1 millionth person with clean water. I'm humbled to say that I'm a part of that, of achieving that. I'm also deeply honored to be a part of the community of people who are continuing to work towards reaching the other 2.1 billion people who lack access to safely managed water today. It took resources, took hard work, took expertise, sure. But I'd argue that those things are useless without a community of people behind that movement. That community word, right? It gets thrown around a lot. Like, let's be honest, it gets thrown around way too much. Well, I want to be clear. I don't think I've cracked the code on community. But I do think that I've noticed something over the past few years. Something that doesn't seem to be unique to humanitarianism. In my experience, it's pretty universal across people, culture, and places. So today I want to tell you a few stories and hopefully highlight why I believe those things, vulnerability, purpose, and dignity, are so integral to true community. So let's start with vulnerability. I guess you could say the lack thereof if you're talking about how I grew up. I don't have some come-from-nothing story. I always had a roof over my head. My mom always made sure I had a meal, and I probably ate way too much. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have a son today, and I certainly hope he doesn't have any worries whatsoever. But I do feel like, and I don't think this is always the case, but it led to my teenage years a little bit of a sense of just floating through life. Well, that all changed when I was 17 years old. I remember I'd just gotten home from picking up my sister. She was at a friend's house about 30 minutes away, and I was standing at the family computer, and I was filling out one of these. I remember that sense of excitement that you get, and we all know this, when you've filled out the perfect NCAA bracket. This is the actual bracket from 2006. I initially went with Duke University to go to the national championship. And then I had second thoughts, and I went with UConn. I'm a Carolina fan, by the way, so I just couldn't pick those Blue Devils. But the last thing I remember is I was entering in these pics. I was entering in the computer in probably ESPN.com. And then everything went black. And as I opened my eyes, I started to realize that I was laying on the ground. I was in my parents' bedroom laying down, and paramedics were all around me. And I realized they were picking me up onto a stretcher. And as I was being wheeled out of the house, I realized that I had these really deep cuts on each one of my forearms. I had a grand mal seizure. It's like it sounds. It's a big one. It causes total loss of consciousness and severe muscle contractions. Now, the next few weeks were riddled with doctor's visits, testing, and I doubt my parents got any sleep at all, but initially we thought maybe I was just epileptic. Maybe I would struggle with seizures for the rest of my life. And the doctor said, hey, you can get one more test. You can get an MRI if you want to. Honestly, we think there's a 5% chance you're going to find anything. My parents, being who they are, were like, we're definitely getting an MRI. And thank God we did, because we found this. I had a tumor in my left temporal lobe of my brain, just beneath the surface of my skull. I hadn't told anyone that year, but I had actually had these spells where it would last maybe 10, 15 seconds. I would get these intense sweats, and I would be unable to. It was like if I was in class and I had a spell, somebody would, if the teacher said, hey, Josh, what's 2 plus 2? I would know in my mind the answer is 4, but I couldn't verbally speak the answer. This was the culprit. And that landed me in one of the most vulnerable states I can ever remember. In a matter of a few weeks, I went from wondering, did I pick the right Final Four teams, to would I be around to watch them? And that vulnerability that I was experiencing, honestly, for the first time, it made me start to wrestle with this question: why am I here? What is the purpose? Looking back, I'm deeply grateful for that time. It sent me on a journey, and it started right there at vulnerability. Along that journey, I met this person. This is Roshni Karki Sapkota. She's a friend and a colleague. She's our country director in Nepal. And the year that we met, just a year prior, she had experienced a pretty vulnerable event in her life, something that I can barely fathom. A massive earthquake. If you're not familiar, on April 15th, 2015, Kathmandu Valley was hit with an 8.1 magnitude earthquake. It killed over 9,000 people and injured another 20,000 more. This is a picture of the destruction. A friend of ours, also there at the time, described it as a deep groan. He said he heard it before he felt it. He said as the groan got closer, he started to see buildings exploding and houses crumbling. He said once it hit him, the sound hit him, he lost all sense of up and down. And this is a quote from Roshni as she describes how she felt at that time. I feel like this is the end. Maybe we are not going to see tomorrow. It shook us. It shook me personally. But it was there that I wanted to work for my people. And Roshni did work for her people. She and a few of her friends, amidst aftershocks and a pretty bleak situation on the ground, reached over 20,000 people with clean water by delivering water filters all over the Kathmandu Valley and even into the surrounding foothills. See, Roshni, she taught me something. She taught me that vulnerability is the gateway to finding purpose. And today, Roshni and her team, their purpose has transitioned from relief to development. And their stated purpose is to reach the unreached in Nepal. They come into a community, and their goal is to build a partnership, to empower the community. So they come in and they help them build a comprehensive access point to water, They work in the home, and they make sure that sanitation and hygiene practices are good and healthy for their children. They make sure that at school, children have hand washing stations and that the little girls and the little boys have access to safe latrines. This year, they want to expand into healthcare facilities. They want to support young mothers as they have their children. They want to make sure they have clean water. Their stated purpose, the tool that they use, water, is yes, to get them clean water, but there's something deeper there to that purpose. And they use water to truly allow people to be who they were meant to be. And I think it gets to this heart of what they're trying to do is to see dignity in people. They're not trying to give them anything. They're not giving them water. It's already there. They're just allowing it to flourish, to bubble up. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. One of the potential complications of my surgery was that I would potentially have complications with my speech afterwards. So it was possible, because the brain tumor was in this area called Broca's area, which controls your speech, I would have a surgery and wake up tumorless and speechless. And I remember that scared me really, really bad. I remember thinking, as a 17-year-old, all you can think about is like, well, I'll be able to talk to my friends. Well, I'll be able to ask a girl on a date. It felt like all normalcy, the ability to connect with people, was going to be impossible. And obviously, I'm standing here today talking to you guys, and I'm deeply grateful to the surgeons actually at Duke University Hospital who removed that tumor. They didn't make it to the Final Four that year, but they're champions in my book. I love them to death. But it's interesting, the work that I do today, that I have the privilege to do, and the people that I get to work with, oftentimes we don't share a common language. It's something that oftentimes, even in the communities, we have absolutely no way of speaking and communicating outside of a translator. And what I've realized is speaking, talking to one another, it only goes but so far. It's definitely surface level, but something like water, it goes past the surface. It goes deeper. Water is something that is the great equalizer, unifier, connector. Water is something that we all need to live. It's often just waiting beneath the surface. I think that dignity is the same. It's often just waiting beneath the surface, waiting to be recognized. So, I want to encourage you. Seek out those vulnerable places in your life. Purpose is waiting there. Dignity already lives there. And I believe that community will thrive there. Thank you.